Today we are obviously talking about hope, and that is the first candle that we have lit in the Advent wreath. Each Sunday we will light a different candle, and then on Christmas Eve, when we have our Christmas Eve service, we'll have the Christ candle, and we'll light that as well. It's a symbolic way of reminding us of all the things we need to remember and believe as we are hoping for the Christ to renew His presence in our life. And the first thing, of course, is hope. And that's what I want to talk about today. I read an interesting article this week on the internet. The Center for Disease Control, CDC, put out their report for 2018. And it was interesting to see in that report that they were saying that the life expectancy of an American citizen has fallen for 3 years in a row. Chances of us living longer are less and less and less. Interesting. You would not have thought that. Greatest, biggest country in the world, that our life expectancy is falling. Now, the Center of Disease Control did not make any opinion as to why that was. But there was a professor at Georgetown University, medical school in charge of disease control, and he had a statement in that article that I thought was really great. So I copied it down because I could not remember everything he said. But it's a great statement about why that life expectancy is declining. He says, financial struggles, family disunity, cultural wars, political wars, gun violence, environmental disasters are all casting a darkness over America. And then he said this, people are increasingly becoming despondent and cynical. Indeed, we have just entered into the age of hopelessness. Yeah. It caught my eye, being that my message today is about hope. An age of hopelessness. That's what we have entered into in this world, not just in America, but all over the world. People are no longer able to have the hope to keep on going, to keep on moving, to become better and better. And so we as a Christian community have to remember what our message is, and we have to refocus on our message so that we can teach others to refocus on this message. And that message is Jesus Christ is the hope of the world. That's what it says. Our hope is not in politicians, thank goodness. Our hope is not in cultural wars. It's not in environmental regulation. None of that is our hope. Our hope is in the coming of Jesus Christ into our life. I was asked a long time ago by my lovely wife if I believed in the second coming of Jesus Christ. And I said, oh yes I do. And I believe in the third and the fourth and the fifth and the sixth and the seventh and the eighth and the ninth and the 10th coming of Jesus Christ. For that's what Christ does, is He continues to come into our life. Come into our life, renew us, renew us, renew us, renew us. And I believe in that renewal process, and I believe in that awakening to a new life in this world, not just once, but many, many, many times as the Lord moves us from one glory to another glory to another glory, you say. That's what I believe. And so I have great hope. Not only for myself, but I have hope for all others. I have hope for these young people here. They may see a very dark and bad world as they grow up. It may be a horrible time in which they live. But I hope they will never forget that despite all of that, there's a light that is shining in the midst of that darkness. And it will one day show us all what we need to be about. So, how did Jesus describe this coming of this Christ into the world? How did He describe it? Well, our gospel reading this morning that we heard said that He described it like bread from heaven. He said it is coming into the world, and He said it is giving life to the world. And life is hope. Hope is life. And it was saying that this bread of life is coming into the world. Oh, there's darkness everywhere. And there's horribleness everywhere. If you think our times are dark, you should have lived in the days of the Roman Empire. Oh, those were some dark days. But Jesus said, no, the bread of life is coming. The bread of life is coming. It's not like the bread that your ancestors ate in the wilderness. This is the true bread of life. And then he goes on to say, I am the bread of life. And then the people listening to him said something that I think is very important for us to regain our hope today. They said to him a phrase that we should make our prayer every day. They said to him, oh Lord, always give us this bread. Always give us this bread. That's what they said right there in the 35th verse of the 6th chapter of John. Sir, always give us this bread. So, there we are. That's how Jesus saw this hope of the world. It was like that which would feed us and which would strengthen us and which would make us new and renew us so that we might rise up like eagles. That's how he saw it. But what I want to talk about today is what is it like to have that hope? Because that's what I see people have forgotten in our Christian faith especially. They have forgotten how to have that hope. They may remember, oh, Jesus is the bread of life. Yeah. Jesus is great. Jesus is wonderful. Jesus is the hope of the world. But do they really have that hope in their heart? Is that what gets you up every day? Do you wake up in the morning and at your breakfast coffee says, oh, I am so glad that Jesus is the hope of my life and the hope of the world? Do you have that hope? Do you have it in your hearts? And what does it really feel like to know that that bread of life comes to you? Do you understand that that's an important thing to know? I have a little illustration from my life that is a parable for me once I thought about it, of what it's like to have the hope we need to have in this world. The hope we need to have for this new life that's coming. For this new day that's coming. Not just in the world, but in us. Us. We're changing. We are becoming better and better and better. As I often say to many of you, if you're not getting better, you're getting worse. Okay, it's true. God wants you to get better and better and better. So what's it like? Well, back in the spring of this last year, I had some medical problems. And many of you were here and saw that. As you know, I am a type 2 diabetic, and also I had had a stent put into one of my major veins. And when I went to the cardiologist, it was discovered that I had an AFib condition, and I needed to change my medications. Well, you know, in Ecuador, one of the big problems among doctors is they don't talk to each other at all. Cardiologist will prescribe what he wishes, and the endocrinologist will describe whatever she wishes, and you've just got all these pills to take. But how do they act with each other? How do they react with each other? That's the question, you see. Well, anyway, they changed my medication, and it did affect my diabetic medication greatly. My blood sugar just went off the charts. It had been very nicely controlled by the medication I was having. But this change in the cardiac medicines were making a big change. And as the blood sugar went up, I lost a lot of weight. Many of you probably remember I went down to 162 pounds, 164 pounds. And that was like a 15 or almost 20 pound loss. Amazing. But that wasn't the worst of it. The worst of it was this. When I had been taking my regular medicine, it was okay at night. I could eat my supper and it would be fine. But once that change took place, I would go to bed and get ready to go to sleep, and about midnight I would just wake up with this great hunger pain. Oh, it was horrible. Got to eat something. Well, you know, if a diabetic gets up in the middle of the night and eats a pound of ice cream, it's not a good thing. Not a good thing to do at all. But I had to get up. I had to have something to eat. And of course, you know what that did. That made the blood sugar even go higher. And so for several days, I was miserable because I could not get that nice sleep that I used to have when my medications were all working like they should. I was losing sleep at night. It was a sleepless night almost every night. And I didn't know how I was going to get over that. it came to me that it was basically all I was going to have to do was endure it. So I just sort of gritted my teeth and said, okay, I don't care how hungry I get tonight, I'm not getting up and eating anything. Okay, and I did. I made it. I didn't actually sleep the whole night, but I made it through the night without eating anything. And I thought, man, this cannot go on. You know, it's hard to preach when you didn't get any sleep the night before, let me tell you. So anyway, I went on for a couple more days, and I began to develop ideas of what I could do not to have that hunger, to overcome that hunger. First thing I decided to do is drink lots of water. Well, that had two effects. One, it did take the hunger away for a while, but it did wake me up for other reasons. And I woke up probably, I guess it must have been about 1:30. I drank all the water at 12. Wide awake, hunger again. Oh, it's 1:30 and I don't eat breakfast till 7. That's a long time to sit here and suffer. So what am I going to do? How am I going to get on through this? And so I thought to myself, what I need to do is I need to think about something other than this hunger. But it was so hard to do that. But I said, I remember somebody saying that if you're having trouble sleeping, you start counting from 100. And you go all the way down, and pretty soon you'll be asleep. So I started counting from 100. And by the time I got down to 21, I was really thinking this is not going to work. So I quit counting. By that time, it was probably about 3:30 in the morning. Still hungry. Now, at that time, we were practicing our spring concert at the chorale, and we were getting ready to sing all these songs. And so I thought to myself, well, I'll think about a song that we're going to sing. And I'll just say it in my head, and maybe it'll make me go to sleep. And I thought of the Bohemian Rhapsody that we were going to sing, the song from Queens, you know. And it starts off saying, you know, is this reality or is it just a fantasy? I'm caught in a landslide, no escape from reality. And it became it just kept hearing it in my ear over and over. Just kept hearing it. I just sat up in the bed. No escape from reality. Thank you, David. I appreciate it. So there it was. It was getting on to about 4:30 or so, about that time. And I was so tempted to get up and eat something. I just got to get up and eat. I just can't do this every night. It's not going to work anymore. And so I began to pray upon it, which was something I should have perhaps done earlier. And as I was praying upon it, a thought came to me that was very, very, very important. And that thought that came to me was, think about breakfast. Think about the hope of the breakfast that's coming. Don't think about your hunger. Think about the breakfast that's coming. And I could see the bread, I could see the eggs, I could see all that. And so I just thought about that. Oh, it's not going to be long before breakfast comes. It's not going to be long before my hunger will be fed. And you know what happened? I went to a peaceful sleep. And the next night I did the same thing, but I started it early in the night. I started remembering, don't worry about the present pain. Don't worry about the present hunger. Don't worry about the present misery that you feel down here. Think on the glorious breakfast that's coming. And that's what I began to do. And it worked. I got many good nights of sleep, and pretty soon it all adjusted, and I got a little more change on my medicine, and now I sleep like a baby every night. You'll be happy to know that. I'll be up here sleep deprived trying to preach. But the parable of this story is simply this, and it's something for us to remember. And the parable, the meaning is simply this. We have a lot of things in our life that make our nights sleepless. If we went around the room, I'm sure everyone could tell us of all kinds of things that make your night sleepless. things you're worried about, things that you're thinking about, things that you're afraid of, things that you wish could change but you can't change, things that you don't feel like worked out like they should. You feel those things and they just kind of keep you awake at night, literally and figuratively, and you don't know what to do about it. Well, here is the message that Jesus gave us. The bread is coming down from heaven to you. The pain you feel, the misery you feel, the stuff that you're going through is not the point. The point is, it is an opportunity for you to have hope that the day is coming when you will find the relief you need. That's it, you see. It's the way Christ comes back to our life. Christ just doesn't pop out of a box and say, "Hey, how's everybody doing? Happy Christmas." No, Christ comes to you through the misery, the difficulty, the confusion, whatever else it is you've got in your head that won't allow you to be at peace, whatever it is that won't allow you to have the joy of living. That's where Christ comes, you see. It's no mistake that Christ comes at night. It's no mistake that Christ comes into the lowest, most miserable kind of dwelling you can think about. That's all purposely written for us that way, so we can understand that whatever misery we are and facing at this time, whatever darkness we are facing at this time, we need not to focus on the darkness, but to focus on the light, focus on the bread that's coming. Oh, you may be hungry right now, and you may think, "I can't make it through this. I don't know how I'm going to get through this. I don't know how I'm going to survive." Let me tell you, think about the bread that's coming. Think about the way God is going to lift you up and make you more like Christ because of the darkness you just went through. If you focus on the darkness, you will be nothing but dark. If you focus on the misery, you will be nothing but miserable. But if you refocus on what Christ is doing for you and how Christ is bringing you to a higher level of faith, to a higher level of joy, to a higher level of peace, and that is your Christmas present every year, then you can get through the night. You won't have that hunger anymore. And you will say what they said to Jesus that day, "Oh Lord, always give us this bread." Because we don't know the bread's coming. Well, there's another thought here I want to share with you this morning. And it's in that same verse. I'm always amazed when I read a Bible verse. You'll see it one way and bam, there's a big message there. But you look at it another way and bam, there's a big message there. Keeps us preachers busy. Trying to figure out what is all the messages in that verse. But the verse says it so clearly. When you read it one way, you say, "Lord, always give us this bread." And the key is the bread. But if you read it another way, it says, "Sir, always give us this bread." You know, why is that word always there? The writer could have just simply remembered the people saying, "Give us this bread." Why does the writer put that word always in there? Why would you put such a word like that in there? What's the point of doing that? Well, I think our scripture writer had a perfect and a wonderful message for us. And that message is that in all ways, God always gives us the bread we need, you see. In every circumstance, in every situation, no matter how dark the day may be, no matter how difficult the suffering may be, whatever it is, God always brings the bread to our hunger. Always. I'll say it again. Always. I'll say it one more time. Always brings it to us. It's not just now and then or when we're in really bad shape. It's always, always, always. And if you're a person of faith, that's what it means to be a person of faith. You don't believe God brings the bread just now and then. You believe always. It's like Paul wrote in Philippians. He said, "Do not be anxious about anything, but in all things let your prayers and petitions be made known to God." You see? This is a point we've got to understand. Because a lot of people are hopeless today because they say, oh, well, yeah, that's a good Sunday school lesson, and it maybe makes me a little more patient, a little more kind, or whatever, whatever. But they don't think it applies to everything in the world. They don't think it applies to everybody in the world. And they don't think it applies to every bad situation in the world. But I'm here to tell you, it does. When the Lord says always, He means always. So it's a very important point, and we need to think about that always. And what I'd like to do is share with you an event that happened in my life as a pastor when I was at a point where I didn't think always meant always. I was a pastor at Elgin United Methodist Church, a little town outside of Austin. I've been there for a couple of 3 years. Wonderful people, great little town. I love my time there. We had this young couple there, sweet young couple, great people. They were Christians and really zealous about their Christianity. They were part of our fellowship. They got pregnant. They had a beautiful little baby, and we all rejoiced. It was such a wonderful thing. A little cute baby, a Christian little baby, and we all loved him very much. And it was just the greatest thing that happened to our community because we were kind of an elderly community. And we did not have too many babies being born to us, you see. So it was a great thing. And we were all rejoicing about it, and it was just wonderful. And every Sunday when they came, we'd see the little baby, and it was all great. Then one night, about 2 o'clock in the morning, I got a phone call. Woke me up, dead sleep. And it was the wife. Crying, oh, Pastor, come to our house, please, please, please. And I was like, well, okay, it's 2 o'clock in the morning, but you're calling me to come. And they didn't live far away. It's a small town. She said, our baby is not moving. Come pray for him, please, please. So I said, fine. And I got down there, and I got into the house, and I hugged him, and I went in to see the baby. And it did not take but about a second to realize that baby was as dead as could be. Damn, 3 months old. Dead. My heart broke. Their heart was already breaking. All we could do is hug each other and cry and cry. Why, Lord? How did this happen? What went on? And of course they felt great guilt about it, but there was nothing they did. It was just the way it happened. Of course, we had to call the police. We had to have an investigation done. I had to have the funeral home come in. And it was the most saddest tragedy I had ever seen. I'd seen a lot of bad stuff up to that point. But never had I seen a 3-month-old baby die of no reason, it seemed like. And in my own heart, I had to say, God, why? What purpose does this serve? What kind of bread could be coming from this? This is terrible. I'm a pastor, and I've been preaching that there's always hope. But this does not seem like there's any hope in this situation. Nothing can be said about this situation. This is just a horrible, horrible, dark, horrible thing. And we tried to comfort one another as best we could. Everybody in the church come around them. We all tried to do whatever we could. We prayed. And of course we always said, well, you know, God knows best. And we always said things like that. But that doesn't comfort a couple that just lost their 3-month-old baby. You can say it all day long if you want to. It still doesn't comfort the heart. And it still doesn't give a pastor something to preach. No, it just took the faith out of our community. And for several weeks we were still in a state of shock. We were still just walking around like, what is this all about? How can this happen? And I was praying diligently, and I was thinking, what can I do? What can I say? And my sermons were probably pretty dark at that time. And then one morning I was reading the paper and having coffee and looking at it. And I saw an article. And the article was talking about a group that had been formed in Austin. It was called a SIDS group. S-I-D-S. Sudden Infant Syndrome. Sudden Infant Death Syndrome. S-I-D-S. And it was a group of parents, all of whom had lost their children because of S-I-D-S. It was an answer to my prayer. I knew at that moment what I needed to do. I needed to talk to this young couple and talk to them about going to this meeting and being with these people who had suffered through the same thing they had suffered through, and go there and be comforted by those who had suffered it, because the rest of us had not suffered it. It was hard for us to comfort them. It took some doing, but I finally encouraged them to go. I drove them over to Austin, to that place. And the first meeting was horrible for them, because it brought back all the memories of their little baby. It brought back all the memories of the death, and it was just horrible for them. But there was something about the love in those other parents that were there who said, I feel your pain, that made them feel something deep inside. So they agreed to go back a second time, and a third time. And I could tell that slowly the ice was melting. Slowly they were being changed by being part of that group. And they continued to go and go and go for at least, 7, 8, 9 months. And every time I would see them on Sundays, they had a little bit more peace about them. A little bit more, if you could call it, joy about them. And they were beginning to get into this grieving process and begin to get beyond this horrible death that had happened. And they still had no answer as to why God would allow this to happen. But they understood that there was something and someone who was comforting them, and that somehow they would get on through from day to day. And it was a wonderful thing to see that that change was taking place. And then, about a year later, the husband called me up and said, can you come over for a visit? In a small town, it was easy to do that. Can you come over for a visit? We have something to tell you. And I said, okay, sure, glad to do it. Went over there, and he said, well, listen, what I wanted to tell you was, we have been asked to be counselors for a new SIDS group that is starting in South Austin. This was in North Austin. And they said, do you think we would be qualified? I said, yes. Yes, I do believe the Lord has a mission for you. I do believe the Lord has a plan for you. And I encouraged them to go ahead and believe that God had a reason for them to become counselors of a new SIDS group starting. And they went ahead and became counselors. And that group also grew and prospered under their leadership. And eventually, they worked their way up in that organization, and they became regional directors of all the SIDS group in South Texas. It became their life mission to comfort and to renew these parents who went through the worst hell a parent could go through. They now had a new life. They now had a new direction. They now had a new Christ in their hearts. Before that, they had just been people who came to church and sang hymns and went away. But now they were full of the love that God has for all who suffer. And this was their way of carrying out their mission to those who suffer this horrible, horrible event. It was a miraculous, wonderful change for them. Then one day at a fellowship meal, I was talking to them, visiting with them a little bit, and the wife called me over to the side. And she whispered in my ear, she said, "We're pregnant again." I rejoiced. I said, "Praise God. Praise God." And then she said something else that just touched my heart. She said, "Thank you for never letting us give up on the hope that we would see it through." And then she said, "We've got a new baby and we've got a new life. What more could you want?" Brought tears to my eyes. And I thought to myself, no, I had nothing to do with this whatsoever. The glory belongs to God. Because I saw the power of God and how it works in the deepest valleys that we might ever have to walk into. I saw the power of God take this couple that was crushed and turn them into a new minister of Christ in the world. I saw it with my own eyes. It was the power of God that did it. And what it did for me is it made me so convinced And this is the message I want to leave you with today. It made me so convinced now that there is absolutely nothing in this world or in the world to come that Christ cannot relieve. I believe that 100%. I do not care what it is that comes your way. I don't care how dark it is, difficult it is, hurtful it is, tragic it is, whatever. People come to me now all the time with their troubles and their trials and their temptations, and I can see it in their eyes. They're looking at me as if I would be shocked or if I might feel that there was no hope for them, and I don't feel that at all. I don't care what you tell me. I know what I believe. I know in whom I believe. And I am persuaded beyond any doubt that there is no darkness that Christ cannot light up. There is no hunger that the bread of Christ cannot feed. And we have that glorious good news in our life. And it is tremendous to know this. And we ought to just be filled with excitement and hope every day of our life. Because if you can hope that, if you can know that, if you can know that there's nothing in this life that you will ever face that Christ cannot get you through, if you can know that, how brave you can be, how courageous you can be. It's like the great theologian Paul Tillich says, you can have the courage to be, because you now know what is the truth. And that truth is, there's no darkness so great that Christ cannot light up. No hunger so great that Christ cannot fill. The message of the Scripture is clear. Always give us this bread. No matter how hard it might be, always give us this hope of this bread. The final word I will share with you this morning comes from the Gospel of John as well, 22nd verse. It's a story we've all heard, but I want you to hear it in the context of what I've just told you. My hunger in the middle of the night, this couple that had no hope. I want you to hear this story in that context. The resurrected Jesus comes to the Sea of Galilee, and there are His disciples on the shore, broken-hearted, filled with confusion, got no idea why they're having to do what they're having to do, got no idea why they're going where they're going, got no idea about any of that. Their Lord is dead, and they don't understand, and they don't know what to do or what to say about it. But the resurrected Christ, He comes to them on that shore, and He invites them to come over to Him. And do you know what He says to them? Come, let's have breakfast. It's no accident. The connection between the bread of God and the breakfast of the Lord. That's the message we need to hear. No matter how hungry you may be, breakfast is coming. No matter how lost you may be, the King is coming. No matter what, we don't focus on any of that. We just focus on this one thing, that the bread of heaven is coming our way, and we're so excited to have it. And that's why we say in our prayers, I hope every day now, Lord, always, always give me this